In today's video, I'll explain how the Social Security time bomb just got worse. Hey folks, I'm David McKnight, best-selling author of The Power of Zero. The Social Security Administration just released numbers on the cost of living adjustment for 2023. How big was the bump? An astounding 8.7%. That's the largest bump since 1981 when it was 11.2%. The federal government began indexing Social Security to inflation in 1975 as a result of legislation spearheaded by Richard Nixon in 1972. This legislation stipulated that Social Security could be linked to the Consumer Price Index. In fact, it would literally take an act of Congress to stop indexing Social Security for inflation. Unfortunately, this exposes our country to a vicious cycle of spending from which it is very difficult to escape. Now, I'm not saying we should get rid of Social Security, far from it. I believe it's an important safety net for Americans who have paid their fair share into the program. But if the federal government were to print and borrow trillions of dollars like they did during COVID-19 and massive inflation ensues, then they are required by law to increase their expenditure on Social Security. And they do this with money they don't have. So they end up printing or borrowing even more money to pay for it. And as a result, inflation once again goes up. And as inflation goes up, so does the cost of Social Security, and they once again have to print or borrow more money to bridge the shortfall. You sort of see how this can be a recipe for disaster for our country? Currently, the federal government would have to cut everyone's Social Security benefits by 20% in 2035. That's a 20% across-the-board cut. I know that sounds bad, but it gets worse. When inflation outpaces the wage increases that help keep Social Security fully funded, then you have an even bigger shortfall. And this is precisely what happened in 2022. Inflation outpaced the growth of the wage base, and that in turn accelerated the date by which those 20% cuts would have to take place. Over the next 3 decades, the news gets even more apocalyptic. According to Dr. Larry Kotlikoff out of Boston University, we have a fiscal gap of $239 trillion. That means to pay for unfunded obligations for so-called entitlement programs like Social Security, we'd have to have $239 trillion sitting in a bank account today earning Treasury rates. How much do we actually have? Zippo. But let's be real. What's the likelihood that the government will actually cut everyone's Social Security by 20% in an attempt to stabilize the program? That's a worst-case scenario, and in my mind, it's not likely to happen. Most politicians want to avoid cutting benefits like Social Security for their most vulnerable citizens. Cutting Social Security is a great way to get voted out of office. You may recall the campaign ad run against Paul Ryan in 2011 when he floated the idea of privatizing Medicare during his campaign. The ad showed someone dressed in a suit who looked just like Paul Ryan pushing a grandma in a wheelchair over a cliff. This is why politicians are loath to recommend any cuts to entitlement programs. It immediately turns into ad fodder for the opposition. So what other alternatives does the government have to shore up Social Security? Only one I can think of. They're going to have to raise taxes on hardworking Americans like you and me to help plug that hole in Social Security and other entitlement programs. And the longer they wait to raise those taxes, the more painful the fix is going to be when they finally take action. So, while this 8.7% bump in Social Security benefits was great news for a huge swath of retirees who needed relief from this punishing wave of inflation, it's only worsened the fiscal trajectory of our country. It's only increased the likelihood that the federal government will have to raise taxes on a massive portion of U.S. taxpayers who have worked hard and played by the rules. If you have significant balances in your IRAs and 401ks, the IRS now has their sights trained squarely on your retirement accounts. The uncomfortable truth is that over the last 100 years, the government has a track record of raising federal income taxes whenever they need huge infusions of cash. And every year that goes by where they don't have the courage to make tough decisions on Social Security, the more draconian the fix will be on the back end. And that means you'll have much less after-tax retirement income than you ever thought possible. So this is my invitation to take advantage of the next 4 years of historically low tax rates to get your hard-earned retirement savings shifted to tax-free. Pay taxes at lower rates today so that by the time tax rates do go up, you have done all the heavy lifting and you can take those dollars out tax-free. You want to shift the money slowly enough that you don't rise into a tax bracket that gives you heartburn, but do it quickly enough that you get all the heavy lifting done before tax rates go up for good. If you'd like to learn how to shield your hard-earned retirement savings from the impact of higher taxes, head on over to davidmcknight.com. I'm happy to lend a hand. And if you have any comments or questions, feel free to drop them into the comments section below. I'll respond to every single one of them personally. And don't forget to click like, subscribe, and the bell so you never miss a video. This is David McKnight. I look forward to seeing you on the next video.